And so if you are a participant, if you will turn off your video and your audio for the duration of the first part of our conversation, because it will slow down the internet connection a bit. And then when we get to the Q&A portion, you are more than welcome to turn your webcam and audio back on to interact with the panelists. And you're also welcome to use the chat feature, either to introduce yourself to one another or to drop in questions throughout our conversation. So CJ, I think you're here. Can we hear you?
I'm here. I
Excellent.
apologize for being late. I am here.
Not a problem.
Hey, CJ.
Hello,
Woo! there she is. I can only see one of you at a time. So this is good. The slide pack going. Okay.
All right. So I think we are ready to start. Good evening, everyone. My name is Andrew Harper. I'm the Manager of Employee Relations for the Career Professional Development Office, and also have the privilege of serving on the Alumni Board of Directors. And so we are excited to talk about a topic that those of us that will be speaking on the panel tonight know a lot about and could probably talk about all the time, both the good and the bad, everything involving resumes. Just a few ground rules as we get started this evening. Because we are using the meeting function and not the webinar function through Zoom, we'd ask that you keep your webcam off and on silent if you're not a panelist. And then you can turn that back on later on when we get to the interactive Q&A portion. Please use the chat to introduce yourself and use that to submit questions. And like I said, we will conclude with the Q&A. So this evening, I will let them introduce themselves in just a few seconds, but we've got Juanita Baldwin from the Texas Commission on Environmental Quality, Marcus Everett from Enterprise Holdings, myself, as I just introduced myself, and then CJ Harris from Luminex. Tonight, you'll also probably see the names Jason De La Rosa, who's the Interim Director for the Career and Professional Development Office, as well as Denise Rocha, who is the Director of Special Events and Projects and University Advancement. And they're going to try to help me out by moderating the chat, as well as other questions that all of you may have. Just to give you a brief outline of the things we think we're going to discuss, we realize we could move in a lot of different directions on this topic, and that it may not be completely confined to resumes, but talking about how the resume is one part of the application process. It's not the only piece. Identifying and writing content that really tells your story, and of course, just basic formatting that is important because that's how you can effectively really communicate your key qualifications. And then again, the Q&A at the end. Just a brief reminder, career and professional development services are available to alumni. We are open for business. We are all working remotely, but we are open. So you can schedule virtual appointments. You can drop in for walk-in hours. We have our drop-off resume service, which you can upload your resume in a form, and then we will get back to you within 3 business days with feedback. And then, of course, you can search jobs and schedule appointments in our handshake system. And all of those things are available by calling us, emailing us, or visiting our website. And I will put this slide up towards the end one more time. But we will, again, go back to our panelists, who I'm very thankful are able to have this conversation with us tonight. We all know each other and have worked with each other in different capacities and professional associations. So I think this will be a fun conversation. And starting with Marcus, we'll go ahead and begin to have each of you just briefly introduce yourself.
Hi, everybody. My name is Marcus Everett. I'm the recruiting manager for Enterprise Holdings in Central and West Texas. I've been with Enterprise for going on 14 years, and I've been on the recruiting side of the business for 10 plus.
Awesome.
Thank you. Juanita?
Hi there, Juanita Baldwin. I serve as the Education and Outreach Coordinator for the Commission on Environmental Quality. About the first third of my career was actually with startups and .coms, financial services. And then after one layoff too many, I did this pivot to public service, and 19 years later, here I am.
Wow. I I don't think she's saying that right. It can't be 19 years, Juanita.
Okay, CJ, you found me out. It's actually like 19 plus, but you know, who's counting?
I was thinking it was way less. Hello, everybody. I'm CJ Harris, and Juanita allows me to tease her. We have worked together on so many different things. I can't remember all the number of things that we've worked on, but I am the manager of talent acquisition and learning development at the Luminex Corporation. Luminex is a medical device manufacturing company in North Austin.
Excellent. Well, I think where I wanted to start this conversation is sometimes I think there's, whether it's true or maybe it's not, that there's this kind of black hole that resumes go into and that nobody ever reads them or sees them. And so I'm trying to get a perspective from each of you. Under normal economic conditions, and I'm not going to say that now is normal, and I'm not sure that we know what normal will ever look like again for a little bit. So I'm trying to go back to what we do know, what we could put some context around. And I realize that this can differ for every kind of position in industry, but just generally speaking, for a position that requires a bachelor's degree, in the 5 to 10 years worth of experience range, what does that look like when a resume enters an application system or is submitted for a job? Where does it go? Is it going to a human, an ATS machine? Is it a secret little AI avatar looking at it? What's happening to that resume, and what is that initial first step for that application in that document?
Yeah. Andrew, is it okay if I go first?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay. Well, first I want to try to level set. I think it depends on the size of the company. If you're a larger company, because I've worked for larger corporations and I've worked for smaller corporations, but the larger the company, then they're going to have a process. But I'll speak in regards to Luminex. We have an application tracking system. However, we work closely with our managers in reviewing each of the resumes that are submitted. Now, there is a secret I guess everybody should know. If you're just sending it out and your resume doesn't meet any of the minimum requirements, more than likely it just easily goes to a different folder, okay? But if you meet the minimum requirements, the likelihood of it getting in front of a recruiter, such as myself, or the hiring manager will be more likely, okay? And I see a lot of times students and non-students, they will apply for a position maybe just because they have the degree, but they don't have the experience, or they have the experience, but they don't have the degree. And we in a regulated type of corporation, we have to make sure that the candidate is meeting all of the requirements, not just some of the requirements. Non-regulated, it may be totally different. So I'll pass it on to Juanita and Marcus to give their insight on it.
Sure. So TCEQ is a public entity, and our recruitment / application process is very structured. So anyone in the session right now who's applied at our agency or state government is familiar with our mantra of, if you want to apply for this posted position that appears on our website, we require a completed state application. So it begs the question, what about the resume? What role does a resume play at our agency anyway, in terms of the recruitment or even the application process? When I worked on the recruiting side of the house at TCEQ, and I'm at recruiting events or info sessions or networking events, I relied very heavily on that resume. Because for me, that resume begins to tell the candidate's story. It serves as a really important tool, and it gave me clues that if I really hone in on who I'm sourcing, what positions I'm sourcing for, that's where that resume is key. So basically, the role that the resume plays at our agency and pretty much at most state agencies, it serves as a ticket in the door and a precursor to that completed state application.
Mm.
Marcus?
Yeah, I mean, I think that I think CJ hit on a really good point. As far as minimum qualifications are concerned,
Mhm.
that's really key. I mean, your resume is not going to get looked at if you don't meet the minimum qualification position. Not because we have anything against you, but just legally speaking, kind of some of the same stuff that Juanita said is, we can only consider someone that meets the minimum qualifications. But we do also utilize an applicant tracking system. And that's why it's really important that when you do have a resume, it's nice to have all the fancy stuff on it, but that resume is actually uploaded into that applicant tracking system. And if you get too fancy with some of the fonts and you want to put this graphic on and that, the other, that, which is great for graphic design resumes and stuff like that,
Right.
but it could have trouble reading that resume. But for us, if someone does meet minimum qualifications, we are going to review every single resume every single time, along with in marriage with the application.
An applicant tracking system, is it scanning for keywords, or is it more sophisticated in the fact that it can pull, and not just because the keywords on the resume doesn't make someone qualified, it's actually falling in the right category? Does that make sense?
Yeah, no, I get exactly what you're saying. So we don't really put too much value on the keywords in that sense. If someone's already found us and they've gone through the trouble of applying, we know there's more than likely we're going to give everyone the same, at least initial review. The keywords come in into play in a different section that we're going to talk about later, I know, but no, as far as the applicant tracking system specifically, it's going to literally just upload the resume in as pure a form as it can.
Yeah, and Andrew, it's the same thing for us at Luminex, but I do know with some of my peers, they may have it programmed to where it can differentiate based on keywords because it gets so much volume. Our volume isn't that high, so we're like Marcus. It will everything gets uploaded, and then we kind of go through it and review.
When you finally get a chance to actually look at a stack of resumes, whether it's ATS has already helped you get to that point, or you're just simply going through all of them yourself, about how much time are you spending on each of those resumes, and what is your particular eye looking for, at least to put it in the I will look at it one more time stack?
Marcus, you want to go first?
Sure.
Juanita?
Sure. So if I'm fresh off an event where I've collected resumes, if I'm on top of my game, then I've made a little note on the resumes in terms of specific positions that are currently posted or that I anticipate are going to be coming up. The volume may vary greatly. Sometimes back with a couple of hundred and sometimes with a handful. I'm looking primarily for, if I had to general, and you do a lot of high college graduates. So when that undergrad or a grad degree, even if no that degree. So sometimes I'm looking for that primarily STEM type of degree, although we do hiring for other majors as well. Then on the other end of the continuum, I may be sourcing candidates who are experienced and or licensed engineers, scientists, attorneys, accountants with CPAs, etc. So it can vary greatly. So I'm honing in on, do they have the degree that I know will allow them to meet the minimum qualifications of the job, so that post-event, I may follow up with them and invite them, now this is critical, invite them to actually formally apply by submitting a state of Texas application for that job posting. And or do they have the requisite experience that we're looking for a heavy hitting type of position.
So I think that there's a couple things. just to hit on what we look for. I mean, this seems very basic, but believe it or not, it's true. I'm looking for a phone number. I'm looking for an email address. Those are the first things I'm looking for. But you'd be surprised how many times people forget to put those kind of things on their resume, which it sounds like I'm making it up, but I'm not. So that's the first thing, because if I don't have a way to contact you, then it doesn't matter what the rest of it has on there. Now we can get creative and find you on LinkedIn in other ways, but that's the first thing that I'm looking at. And then we go ahead and scan down for the education to confirm the degree. And then we briefly will look at the experience. There's a really good video a study that Monster did, and if you can just Google it, it's on YouTube. I'm pretty sure if you just Google Monster recruiter resume, it'll pop up. But they actually have a video where they surveyed a bunch of recruiters, and they highlight the video how a recruiter looks at a resume. And as soon as I watched it, I was like, that's exactly what I do. And it's somewhere between 10 to 15 seconds is the average time, because we're not judging you at that point per se. We're just looking to see if the resume is valid so that we can go to the next step.
Yeah, Marcus hit it right on the nail. I mean, if I can't figure out how to contact you, phone number, email, pager number, I'm not gonna go look in LinkedIn and try to find you. I'm just not. So if I can find that and then look at, you know, what is it that you're trying to accomplish, your objective. You know, you're looking for a manufacturing engineer role. Okay, this is the role you apply for, perfect. If you have, you know, I'm looking to be an accountant, but you apply for a manufacturing role, I'm probably gonna put that to the side, because I need to focus on those who spent time looking at the job description and they know why they're applying. Many times you'll see people with just a generic resume that they send no matter what the position is, okay? And one thing I always tell students when I get a chance to talk to them is look at that job description, make sure your resume matches the description of the job, because that way, that's one of the 10 seconds Marcus is talking about will catch my eye and help you move to the next phase. But if you are, you know, sending me a resume that doesn't really click with that job description, that's a red flag for me to hold and try to take those that match more accordingly.
And certainly all of you that are in a recruiting function, you are also trying, for your own purposes of doing your job well, you are also having to move on applicants to a hiring manager. And so you need to really present the best possible candidates that you have sourced or recruited at that point.
Absolutely right.
So one of the sayings is the resume doesn't get you the job, the resume gets you the interview. And I think that's all it is. And it's very true. I mean, I've hired some of the best people with the worst resumes, and I've hired some really bad people with really good resumes. So it's just a piece of paper nevertheless, but it's an important piece of paper.
Yeah.
I think one of the most controversial documents.
And I think you bring up a very good point.
Go ahead, Juanita.
Oh, sure. So both Marcus and CJ just brought up some excellent points. So for me, the resume is the hook. And I'm a big proponent of the targeted resume. Sometimes when I'm mentoring or coaching a candidate, we'll talk about the benefit or advantage of maybe creating 2 or 3 different versions of their resume. But to CJ's point, it's really important that whatever version gets sent to a specific organization is targeted for the position at that organization. And I always give like additional bonus points if there's a really good, well-written cover letter that accompanies the resume. Because for me, that speaks volumes. And often if I'm going to advance that resume to a manager for their review and consideration, 9 times out of 10, that manager will say, you know, their writing skills are what we're looking for, or the candidate talked about how detail oriented they are in the cover letter, and did you notice all the typos in the cover letter? And I'm like, oh, they blew it. So a winning combination is that succinct cover letter and targeted resume.
Well, that was actually exactly where I was going next, is all the years that I've helped, probably now over 15 years helping students and alumni and other applicants write application materials. The question ultimately leads to, do I really have to write a cover letter? How do I do this? It seems more difficult than I think that it really is. And I think it's always harder to write your own than it is someone else's. But I think the question is, this is going to take an investment of time and energy to do this well. Is it going to be read? Is it important? Or, I know there are differing thoughts on that.
I think you can ask 10 different recruiters and get 10 different answers. For me personally, the cover letter is something, nice to bring to maybe an interview or something to that effect, but the volume of applicants that we get, there's just no way we can read cover letters. But here's the way out, in my opinion, is in this day and age, there's so much information and research available that you can find out pretty easily if the company that you're applying to, does or doesn't read cover letters. Glassdoor, the Muse, all those type of websites out there. You should have the answers before you even click that apply. That's the type of research and preparation that you need to do before you even think about applying. Is this, is this what I want to do? And then if I do want to do it, is this what's the prerequisite? What's the norm? And it's always good to have a cover letter, but realistically, I think you need to know who's going to look at what, and there's a lot easier ways to find that out now than there was even 10, 15 years ago.
Well said, Marcus. It really depends on the company's culture, and when you're getting a lot of volume, a lot of times we don't look at it. For many of my manufacturing roles, I never look at the cover letter. I just don't have that time, and my team doesn't have the time. But if you're going to apply for a director role, maybe I would probably tell you to put something together, because we won't have as many candidates for that director role. So I think Marcus said it really well. Go ahead and just have one ready. You can always edit it, and depending on the company you're applying for and you learn what their culture is, you'll be ready and you're not starting from scratch.
So on the actual document of a resume, at least my feeling is that the different job descriptions that are appearing in the experience section is probably the most important portion. And I've seen resumes that go on and on and on and on, and they need to be brief and they need to be concise. When you're making those critical choices on that precious real estate on that resume document, what should go under each of those few spots under each job description? What is it that an applicant should be asking themselves that they need to reflect on, that needs to go there, that you are hoping you're going to see?
Yeah.
So the same advice that I would give on a resume or with respect to that to a candidate related to the resume, the same thing would apply to the experience section of the state application. I tell candidates that it's really helpful if they lead with higher level tasks, those that constitute higher level responsibility. So let's say the position that they're describing or listing on the resume is a position that includes some administrative level tasks. I would never lead with those. I would leave those to the very bottom, maybe not even include them at all. Because I often see, as you mentioned, Andrew, just this slew of bullet points, like 10, 12, 15 bullet points trying to capture every single task that comprise that position. And I know that's not what I'm looking for, and that's not what the manager's looking for. Ideally, we're looking for the higher level tasks, maybe no more than 5, maybe 6 bullet points to capture those tasks. So the task maybe a result or tie in an achievement or an impact that the candidate had by performing that task in the organization. For me, that really illustrates a more sophisticated level of thinking and presenting themselves.
I agree. I'm just going to add one other thing. Everything Juanita said, and then I would add some accomplishments. What did you do that made a difference? And it could be in the actual role, or it could be that you volunteered on one of the resource groups, or you teamed with another business unit and y'all went and gathered food for the United Way. Something that just makes you stand out, right? But I would, everything Juanita said, and I would add, you know, some accomplishments that you made, or you were recognized as the top salesperson for the past 2 quarters. Something that would just kind of add an oomph to that paragraph.
So
May I jump
go ahead,
back
Juanita.
in, because you just triggered some. We're in a really unique time, so I believe that it would be to the candidate's advantage to capture how they've had an impact or made a difference with respect to being flexible, taking the initiative, being quick learners, adapting, anything with respect to being resilient, because it almost goes without saying, but it's worth noting that in these times and for the foreseeable future, I don't care if it's public, private, nonprofit, a hiring manager, I would argue, is looking for these traits. So if we can pick them up in that resume, more power to that candidate.
I agree.
I agree too.
So the only other thing that I'll add is, you know, I think that I like to say this, is that getting a job is like studying for a test, and the resume is no exception. And I think that if you're struggling for real estate, like the way you said it, Andrew, which I love that, that's exactly what it comes down to, right? You really got to focus in on the job description once again, and what the functions of the position are, and how can I relate that to my experience. And it's almost like you go back to middle school where you do that thought bubble and you brainstorm off, okay, this position involves sales. All right, what have I done with sales? And start thinking about that and coming up with your top 3. I think that a rule of thumb is 3 bullet points is going to be a minimum. I wouldn't go more than 5. You're just not, you're going to lose impact. The more that you start to do that, it's not going to be as impactful. But you're trying to do this, is what I always like to say. This is what you want to do. Here's the job description. Here's my resume. How can I get it to jive? And, you know, you're going to sometimes maybe have to think outside the box if you're talking entry level with not a whole lot of experience. But ultimately, the more that you can make those bullet points relevant to the description of the job and the functions of the job, the more interest you're going to get in the position that you're applying for.
Yeah, I agree. And then another thing too, let's go back to the real estate. Let's just say you haven't worked in a while and you've been going to school. Don't discredit any volunteer work or work you've done in a student organization, because that's experience. It isn't, some people get confused and say, well, I didn't get paid. No, we're talking experience, whether it's paid or non-paid, and that will help with the real estate as well.
I'm so glad you mentioned that, CJ, because as the state government, on the application, we encourage candidates to list unpaid volunteer community service work and to document it in terms of the skills that they learned or developed, and also to be specific in terms of dates that they were performing that volunteer role, along with being sure to check in the application if it was part-time, give us an average number of hours, because we're going to use a formula to convert that from part-time to full-time, and that can help move the needle over from an experience standpoint. And very often, if I look at a candidate's resume and I'm seeing volunteer work, sometimes that does not get captured on the application, precisely for the reason that CJ mentioned, because it might be confusing that they were not paid. It doesn't matter to us if it's paid or not paid. We are looking for skills performed.
Correct.
And
Thank
so
you, Juanita.
So in terms of where to put that, is it okay to have that under that experience section, or is there an assumption that everything under experience was paid employment?
Well, if my point was, in case you have no
No.
paid, yeah, if you have no paid experience, I think you can put it under experience, and you can always put the, what your title was in parentheses, volunteer. But in some cases, if you have both, you can break it out. It's up to you, as long as it's flowing right. But I've seen many college students, they took up a leave, or they just got out of the military and they've been going to school and they don't have anything. And I'm like, hey, let's make sure you list that military, make sure you list that volunteer work, whatever you've been doing on campus, let us know about it. It's a great representation of what you've been contributing.
Juanita, I was trying to decipher if you were about to say something. So I think for this next piece, I wanted to try to do a lightning round and see if this works. So I'm gonna just list off a couple of basic formatting items that can happen on our resume, and then just kind of get a simple yes or no, and then where we might get some differing opinions, we'll come back and talk about it.
Okay.
Obviously, so in the last few years, I've noticed that there's kind of a migration of putting the full address versus just city and state. Ideas about that?
I'm not worried about it either way.
Not worried about it.
Yeah, not a concern.
But there does need to be a phone number and an email address.
Absolutely.
Yes.
Absolutely.
Absolutely.
Headshot on resume.
No.
No.
Now, too many legal implications.
Agreed.
I would not recommend it.
This is, I think, I feel like this used to be a debate. I don't know that I hear these terms as much anymore, but objective statements, a summary / highlight of qualifications, or don't do either one of those.
Like CJ said, as long as it's specific to the job, but I've definitely, people have put objectives for a whole nother company before, and I'm like, yeah, we're pretty much done before we started.
Yep.
Right. I like to see the summary. I don't think the objective is necessary all the time, but if you're focused on a manufacturing engineering role, and you can clearly state that in 1 or 2 sentences, I don't see anything wrong with it. But if you send that same resume to a biomed engineering role, I think you're shooting yourself in the foot. So it's better to don't do it if you're not going to be, meticulous about changing it.
But just to give you a straight answer, Andrew, I agree with you. I think it's less and less common on resumes these days.
Yeah. Yes.
In terms of having, go ahead, Juanita.
I like seeing a capabilities profile, really short. Actually, maybe even as opposed to an objective, because often the objective could be all over the place, or could be targeting something that company is not hiring for. So
I agree with that too. Yeah.
Infographics.
Yeah.
Yeah. I would say no, because you don't know what system your future employer may have. And if you put that in there, you may bring it to an interview if you're trying to, show and display something. But when you're dealing with application tracking systems, you don't want to put too much graphics in there. That's gonna probably work against you.
What I've seen, because sometimes in career services, we see the first version of resumes, and the infographics that I've seen sometimes make it much more difficult to decipher what I'm actually looking at. And I've gone way past the 15 or 30 seconds looking at that. And I'm like, it has already defeated its purpose, because I can't ascertain what this is trying to tell me. So
I agree, except maybe for IT candidates. if the infographics don't clutter the resume. I like a well-formatted resume with a nice amount of white space so that
Yeah.
I'm able to flow through it as quickly and expeditiously as I can. But once it starts to be redundant and there's like just so much trying to get crammed into that one page of real estate, I'm sunk and I just set it aside.
Yep.
Education, towards the top, towards the bottom.
Oh,
As
I
long
think
as
it
it's-
depends.
I think it depends too. Like, if you are soon to be graduate, maybe put it at the top. Yeah, I think it really depends. It depends on what you're applying for and where you are in life, right? Because I know for me personally, I won't put my degree on the top, but I'm an old lady, so I don't put mine at the top. I put mine at the bottom. But I think someone coming out of school, and depending on the role, if it's a college hire role, they may want to do that.
I think the correct answer, traditional answer, is at the bottom.
Mm.
Yeah, now here's another consideration. On occasion, a job posting may really emphasize or call for, in terms of preferred requirements, a very specific degree, maybe a very specific graduate degree. So if that becomes your ace in the hole, you want to flaunt that and maybe lead with that higher up in the resume. But otherwise, I'm with both CJ and Marcus.
I would
That's a very good point, Juanita. I forgot about that. Go ahead, Andrew.
I've had these conversations with a lot of recruiters, and I've worked with CPA firms that are recruiting for internships. That is the first thing they want to see is the education and the GPA, because those are the two determining factors on the first round of reviewing the resume. Where others, again, having the degree is what is the check mark, but beyond that, it's the work experience and the extracurricular activities and the special projects and those things. Therefore, it could be displayed somewhere else. Length. I feel like, again, I've been doing this for a long time. I have this conversation repeatedly, and again, try to really emphasize that it's about the impact and the amount of real estate there is and the attention span and the time people have to spend on resumes. But must it be one page?
Yes.
Preferably.
There's going to be exceptions. There's exceptions to all this stuff. But
Right.
yes, I mean, one page, if it doesn't fit on one page, is it really that important?
Right. For more senior roles, I think 2 pages is fine.
Agreed.
Because like, let's say, for example, a director role I'm recruiting for right now, I'm looking for over 10 years of experience. So if I don't see it on the resume, then I'm probably gonna be coming back to that candidate, or I may think the candidate doesn't meet the qualifications. But if it's for one of our earlier roles, or we're only looking for 1 or 2 years of experience, why put every job you've ever had? Just put the ones that would, the ones that you've done maybe the past 5 years, or just shows that you have 1 or 2 years of experience. And that's all we kind of need. So that would be my take on it.
And so I have 2 more questions, and then we'll open it up to everyone else. The role of LinkedIn in the job search, I think sometimes if you're returning back to the process of looking for a job, you're trying to navigate LinkedIn and how that complements your resume. Should the content on a LinkedIn profile be vastly different from what may be on a resume? Any recommendations on what that LinkedIn profile needs to do?
I think the LinkedIn is the opportunity to go beyond the one page. I think that's where,
Yes.
the LinkedIn is your, I mean, if the resume is your business card, then the LinkedIn's your dating profile, if you will.
Yeah.
It really expands. A lot of times we'll start with a resume and end up on LinkedIn, but you actually have to have one, and you have to fill it out completely.
I agree with Marcus. I mean, utilize that as your other marketing tool. I mean, it should be able to tell more of a story. you know, if you're limiting to that one-page resume in LinkedIn, you get an opportunity to be a little bit more creative. And so I think that's a good point.
Agreed. On LinkedIn, I also take the opportunity to look at endorsements, recommendations. Is this candidate, do they blog? What do they post? Have they written articles? Back to CJ's comment about creativity and innovation, it's going to kind of give me a more well-rounded picture of the candidate.
Right.
It seems like that. I know when I've moderated career panels in the past, one of the characteristics many employers are looking for in a new team member is curiosity, somebody who's curious about the work that they're about to start doing, and not because anybody told them to do so, just because they want to reach out, they want to be following that latest trends and whatever it is they're interested in, and that they're going to actively participate in conversations. And so LinkedIn does seem like an avenue to show that.
Yes.
My final question before we open it up is, what is the thing that people are doing either for all of time or have maybe more recently been doing on application materials that you just wish they would not do?
I think Marcus hit on it earlier, like using some creative fonts and we can't really read it. So it'll probably be, you know, elaborate fonts. And then the other thing I would say is applying for a position where I can't see in the resume how you qualify based on the job description. Those are probably the two things that I notice the most. And then the third thing is just not putting the contact information. So I don't know how to reach out to them.
Agreed. I think in addition to those pet peeves, for me, I would add really lengthy litany of bullet points underneath experience, so that it kind of suggests that the candidate's not really able to discern what was really important or critical that they performed in that position. Coupled with, I'm not a big fan of including with the resume itself a list of references. I prefer having that be a totally separate piece of paper, like professional references for Andrew Harper, and then bringing those to the interview. So.
Yeah, no, I agree too. That's a good one, Juanita. Marcus, what you got?
You know, I was just going to say, I think everyone is so focused on the resume all the time that sometimes people overlook the application. And the resume is great. Don't get me wrong, it's very important, but I put more weight in the application, and I'll tell you exactly why, because it's the exact same for every single applicant. And that gives me an even kind of comparison, you know, and depending on how thorough someone, you know, here's the pet peeve. If you make your resume and you fill out the application and then you put "see resume" in the application. And that's someone, to me, who's just, quite frankly, lazy. That's
yes.
the truth. And we pair them up a lot of times to make sure they jive. So it's important to, when you sit down, you've already taken the time to put so much effort into your resume. When you sit down to fill out the application, take it slow, line by line. Make sure it's thorough and completely filled out, because we talk about resumes so much, but I don't need you to even have a resume for you to hire you. I need you to have an application.
I know that sometimes the frustration with individuals entering the job search process again is that you conclude it does take a lot of time. And I know I've heard the quote that looking for a job is a full-time job. Every application does take some time. You have to tailor your resume and cover letter per position that you're looking for, particularly if you're still kind of deciding what exactly you're going to want to do next. And you may use the job search process as a way to explore a couple different kind of positions. I think there has to be a level of acceptance to that, but so you can get in that really good mental space to go forward with the process. So I'm curious if anyone else has questions. Feel free to turn on your webcams and or audio at this time. I know there are some career counselors in my office that are on the call, not to put them on the spot, but they may also have some questions. So
I have a question.
And this is Julie. Julie's one of our career counselors.
So Marcus, kind of going off what you were saying about don't be lazy in the application. So are you expecting when you're filling out like the duties on the application part, would you expect that to be different from the duties that you mentioned in your resume, or would you say copying the same thing is sufficient?
I think it's if it's totally completely different, then I'm going to have some concerns. It really just depends on the format of the application. Honestly, I'm not necessarily so concerned with how thorough it is, or you know, and I don't want you to get creative, but I just want to see that you made the effort, because that's what we're looking for. The people that are going to do what needs to be done to accomplish a goal. And, you know, we're ultimately about getting someone on the phone and talking to them and really, you know, digging in that way. But those are just things that some hints that maybe, you know, they're not going to go that extra mile for our customers because it was just, you know, easier not to. And there's no excuse for that, because you're doing the application at your pace. We don't have a timer that tells us how long it took someone to fill out an application. So to me, that's just someone who is looking for a job, but they're not necessarily looking for this job, if that makes sense.
Thanks.
This is Emily. I put one in the chat, but I'll go ahead and ask it. If you send out a resume and it's been a couple of weeks, maybe 2 weeks, 3 weeks, and you haven't heard back, how do you feel about them reaching out to you again and asking the status?
Well, this is CJ. I'll go first. I get that all the time. I don't have a problem with it as long as they don't have a problem with the answer I'm going to give them. Sometimes, you know, you have to understand your potential employer, right? They have a process. So as the recruiter and the manager of the process, once I get in, I do phone screens, and then I have my managers involved. They have a schedule. So their schedule may not be on my schedule. Like, I may want them to call everybody that I think will be great the next day. But sometimes, depending on what they have prioritized, that may be a couple of weeks, right? And I'm not saying it's a perfect scenario, but I'm just giving you some real talk here. So I have no problems being that buffer. In fact, whenever I do a phone interview and I talk to the candidate, I say, hey, if you don't hear from me or any of the hiring managers in the next 2 to 3 weeks, give me a call, shoot me an email. I'd be happy to tell you this is where we're at. We're either on hold or we're still interviewing candidates. Because my thing is, if you have a good experience, Emily, you're going to tell someone else. And if you tell someone else, they're going to tell somebody else. So I'm almost like in sales, you know, I don't want anyone who applies to Luminex to say anything negative on my watch. So I'm always happy to give you some feedback when I can. In some cases, hearing from me may be longer than you anticipated, but I always tell candidates that I have a phone interview with. Here's my email, here's my phone number. You're welcome to give me a call, reach out, and I'll share with you what I know and let you know how things are going.
Okay, thank you very much.
You're very welcome.
This is sort of off topic, but somewhat related. I think right now everybody is trying to get a sense of, is everybody in an uncertain space, including employers, about what hiring will look like? Are decisions already being made? Is it really all over the place? Because I think many people are still in a good position, but they may be looking and thinking things could continue to change, and I may be re-entering this process of looking for a job. Any commentary or sentiments that you could share about where you think everyone's at in terms of the recruiting community?
I'm gonna give a CJism. I'm not speaking on Luminex
Yeah.
right now, okay? Okay. Pay attention to the news. Pay attention to the news, because people in biotech, we're still hiring. Look at what's happening, and they'll tell you, companies that are hiring, you know, H-E-B, Walmart, there's still state roles that are open. So I would highly tell people to pay attention to the news, look at the different industries. Just because you're hearing some negative stuff doesn't mean that it's all over the world that way. It's different for every industry. And I think this time, believe it or not, is going to have candidates up their game in the regards of research, in the regards of utilizing the career and professional development services, job coaches, workforce solution. We have the tools, but it's just going to make us be a lot more attentive to how we are going to be pursuing our new opportunities. That's just what I've been observing.
Yeah, you know, CJ is correct. There are going to be people who are hiring more now than ever before, but let's be real here. The job market has changed dramatically. There are it's a lot more competitive. And for those of the people that are watching that weren't around in 2008, this is going to be even more competitive than it was then. So you are going to have to up your game. You're going to have to think outside the box. It's a buyer's market now. It's not a seller's market anymore. Or maybe I got that backwards. But you know, the shoe's on the other foot, and it's going to be tough. There's going to be a lot of people out there looking for work now. That is a reality. So you're going to have to, you know, if you're about to go into the job market, you've never done so before, you're going to have to think outside the box and be open to a lot of opportunities that maybe you weren't. It's not forever. You know, a lot of economists, if for those of us that keep up with that kind of stuff, are predicting that this is going to be more of a 2022, 2023 rebound economically. So we're not talking about working at, you know, Walmart or Amazon or wherever it might be for the rest of your life, but it is going to be important that when these things, you know, these other jobs start to come back around, that you've shown you've done stuff, that you've been out there doing what you can, that you do have that work ethic. So I think it's going to be, you know, the narrative is going to change than even it was, you know, 60 days ago. You know, people are going to have to be a lot more open-minded about what they're going to do for, you know, a job.
I agree.
I totally agree. And in terms of public sector, I'm seeing a half a dozen or more job postings on our website, and we've been pretty consistent going back to early March when our work from home coordinates who are that if you see a job that has budgeted funding, and this is a very big deal, because our fiscal year runs through the end of August. So these are some touch points to kind of keep in mind. If the job is posted, that manager has approved budgeting for it. It also means we're accepting applications for the position. We're screening applications. Human Resources is forwarding applications that meet the minimum and/or preferred requirements to the manager. Now that's where managers at our agency are, I guess they're adopting a couple of different approaches. Some managers are immediately taking those applications because they have such a need to fill that job that they're immediately conducting virtual telephone interviews, extending offers as soon as practical, and bringing the candidate on board, probably in a remote virtual type of hiring scenario until we're able to go back. Because right now we're almost 100% teleworking for the most part. However, there's some managers who are teleworking and maybe their telework situation represents quite a few challenges with having to homeschool or whatever the scenario might be, that they may not immediately, you know, jump on the bandwagon of scheduling interviews. So their process might take a little bit longer. However, the fact remains if the job was posted, encourage public sector, because keep in mind that next year is a biennium. So let's guess what that's going to mean in terms of mandates for budget savings, etc. So food for thought.
Mhm.
It also seems like this is an opportunity, I think, for all of us to, and this kind of goes, I think, hopefully in tandem with the mission of St. Ed's, that this is a very, we keep saying the word unprecedented, but it's also much bigger than any one of us. It's a humanitarian issue that, again, crosses every kind of person, every kind of country. And so we may not get to do the thing we really want to do, but there's certainly going to be work that needs to be done. And so it may need to think about what we want to do next in terms of what needs to be done, what can I do to kind of get the world through this crisis for however long it's going to last. And that's just one thing I've been thinking about over the last couple of weeks as we've been going through all of this.
Well said, Andrew.
Yeah, well said. I agree wholeheartedly. And I would just add to the individuals on the call, and if you know of anybody as well, I've been getting a lot of requests on LinkedIn from people saying, I'm about to graduate and, here's my resume. And that's not the best way to go about it. I think it's always good to reach out to people at that particular employer, but it starts with the job description. Just handing someone your resume may not get you as far, but if you are applying for the actual role and then connecting with them, I think that would be a better approach.
And then any comments? I know we've got like 1 minute left.
Totally agree.
Mm.
Austin's always been a very interesting place because when the economy goes through some challenging times, some cities people leave and seek other opportunities, where in Austin, nobody seems to ever leave. And certainly, I've never practiced what I preached. There's other places beside Austin, Texas. There's other places besides 78704. But I think, people love Austin. They want to stay here. But as we, kind of go through these times and we kind of think about where opportunities are, of course, Austin's very different from the way it was even 15 or 10 years ago. But any commentary on just Austin and staying here and the job market?
Well, I'll start. I'm not from Austin. I came to Austin after graduating from college because there weren't any jobs in Houston at the time. Houston was a huge oil and gas industry, still is. But one thing I would encourage people is if the goal is to get your career kicked off, right? As you're looking at employers, and this is where I'm talking about elevating your candidate education. There may be a company that has a role in Oklahoma. Check and see if they have an office in Austin. Find out what they do in Austin, because if you get the role in Oklahoma, guess what? You may be able to transfer back into Austin and they may pay for it. It just depends on your strategy, right? So I think as candidates, we're gonna have to be a lot more strategic and understand what's our objective. Is it to secure a role, get a career, get some money flowing in the household? Start there, and then maybe second, wherever you apply, do they have opportunities back in Austin? Do they have partners in Austin? Because where you start doesn't mean that's where you're going to stay. So that'd be my commentary.
Totally agree. I'm also seeing a handful of job postings that have come on my radar for companies that are based outside of our perform remotely. That scenario will continue to play out for the foreseeable future. So I think that bodes well for candidates also. As CJ said, who are looking to elevate their candidate experience, add to their skill set and their competencies.
Yeah, that's a good point. I think this is all showing us that quite a bit of work can be done fairly effectively remotely.
May I add something right quick just before we sign off? Speaking of individuals in different roles, etc., I would like to take poetic license, if you will, and extend a very big thank you to Andrew Harper, a longtime partner of mine and our agency. I understand that you are transitioning, and you will be tremendously missed. What an asset, what a tremendous asset you have been. I can't even begin to tell you the number of kudos in the 10 plus years that you and I have worked together, the kudos that have been extended from our management, our leadership, our C-suite folks about the awesome partnership that we have with St. Edward's. And I want to thank the entire career services team. You know, some have already transitioned throughout the years, but you've always been a mainstay, Andrew. You're someone we can count on. You're reliable, you're consistent, and on the flip of a dime, you can pivot and be flexible and adapt to, you know, whatever the change is. I cannot even imagine St. Edward's Career Services without you. And I would imagine that they're missing you already. So just wanted to say
Well, thank you, Juanita. I'm still with the university for 2 more weeks. I still will be working in this space, and we'll still be on the alumni board. So certainly we'll be still connected to St. Edward's. But certainly the part of my job that I enjoy the most is working with students, as well as all the relationships I formed. I think there's a special bond between career services folks and recruiting folks. You know, we're in that really interesting space between the dream and the reality, and then having to wrestle with that with our applicants and our students. And I think that's why such a great group of people, because we really understand that in one another. So thank you all to all of you. Well, I think that wraps us up. Thank you, Marcus. Thank you, CJ. Thank you, Juanita, for doing this on an evening. It's really much appreciated, and I look forward to continuing the conversation in another setting.
Awesome, my pleasure.
Everybody.
I always love coming back to St. Ed's.
thank you. Yay,
Thank you.
Hilltoppers.